My name is Jerry Gill, and today is December 4th, 2008. I'm visiting with Dr. Joe Alexander in the OSU Library on the Oklahoma State University campus. This interview is for the O State Storage Project, which is part of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Joe, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you, Jerry. It's always good to be with you.
Well, those at OSU know a lot about Dr. Joe Alexander, but could you share with us maybe a little bit about your early life, where you grew up and kind of where you went to school?
Jerry, I grew up in rural Northern Virginia, and back when the Redskins were still playing in Griffith Stadium, and the Washington Senators were still a baseball team.
Oh,
So you know that was a long time ago. And went to a local grade school and high school. And then when I was almost through my senior year in high school, my father was transferred to Arizona. He'd worked for the telephone company, and so I went out there and went to the University of Arizona to go to undergraduate school. And for as long as I can remember, all I wanted to be was a veterinarian. That's all I ever wanted to do. And Arizona didn't have a veterinary school, so I went to Colorado State, the veterinary school, and then went to Cornell University for my graduate work in veterinary surgery. Went to private practice for a year, and then the University of Tennessee started a new veterinary school. And I went there in 1976, I guess, and had a great early academic career. It was an exciting place to be with a new school and all. And then Virginia built the veterinary school, and I wanted to go there in the worst way. I was very fortunate to be hired there. And while I was at Virginia Tech, something had happened at the University of Tennessee. Is the dean had called me to his office, and at Tennessee, the dean's office is on a hill, and so you have to walk up the hill to get there. And I swear he always called you up on the hottest day of the year, so when you got there, you were perspiring and you looked. But he really gave me some great advice. He said, you ought to think about going into administration, and was willing to support me to go back to graduate school at night. And I got my master's in educational administration and supervision there at Tennessee, and then went to Virginia Tech and went there as a faculty member, and was fortunate enough to become director of their teaching hospital, and then later to become a department head. And I was planning to stay there my whole life. I think Blacksburg is a wonderful place. It reminds you a lot of Stillwater and Oklahoma State University. And then I got a call from Larry Boger, and was very fortunate to be hired as the dean here in 1985.
Let me go back to, where do you think your love for being a veterinarian come from?
First of all, I think you have to love animals, and I always loved animals. And our local, we had a small farm. When I say that, 7 acres, 4-H projects, farm and dogs. And our veterinarian was a guy that I just really, really looked up to. He was not only, I think, a wonderful person, but he was active in the community, and just the kind of person you want to emulate.
Great. Well, so can you give me a little story about when Dr. Boger came to you, the background about what did you think of Oklahoma State University and that opportunity?
Sure. Well, I'd never been to Oklahoma. Certainly never been to Oklahoma State. I used to say that when Willard Scott gave the weather, he stood in front of Oklahoma, so I didn't know where it was. And when I got a call from Dr. Boger, you have to remember, I was 37 years old, and I'd been a department head for 2 years. And I thought, this guy's got the wrong number. But it was a great honor. I mean, it was just a great honor to even be considered. And came out and fell in love with Stillwater. And I felt like the opportunities here for the veterinary college were really great, because as you go through your dean's interview, you interview with people outside the university. And I think it's because of the state's dependence on animal agriculture, people outside of the university took great pride in the veterinary school. And I just thought, boy, there's something you can't buy. And I've certainly been to schools that are much, much better funded. They have bigger and better facilities and bigger faculty and all of those things. But the pride that people in Oklahoma take in the veterinary school is unique.
What were some of the early challenges for you, in the college, and you assumed the dean's position?
Well, when I interviewed for the job, Dr. Boger indicated to me that the state had just given the biggest percentage increase to the university in its recent history. There had been significant salary raises that year, and I arrived on May the 15th, and on June 15th, I got a letter from the governor saying that we should withhold 10% of our budget because oil had fallen to $12 a barrel. And so certainly, I didn't know where the men's room was, much less how I was going to figure out where to find 10% of our budget. Now, we never had to give that back. And as you may know, the veterinary school is somewhat unique in that we do not get our funding from the university. Funding comes directly from the state regents, as it does to OSU's medical school and OU's medical school and the law school and what have you. So any cuts that are made, you're on your own for those. So certainly that was a big thing to have to deal with right away. I thought that the real strength as I got to Oklahoma State was that this university produced students that could immediately go out and contribute to a practice. They were well trained in the everyday things of veterinary practice. I felt like what was lacking was the whole school was geared toward that. And I thought we needed to be more geared toward research. We needed to be more geared toward bringing in clinical specialists that were going to enhance the national reputation of the institution. And certainly we had to work on finding more resources. And so those were the big challenges.
Well, can you talk a little bit about some of the areas that you felt need to be strengthened in research and some of the things you did to enhance funding for research?
Well, as I looked at the clinic first, and of course the clinical sciences are the hallmark of any veterinary college. The clinic didn't open until 11 o'clock in the morning, and it closed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The reason it did that is because they had so few faculty, and faculty were expected to teach courses, they're expected to give extension programs, and they're expected to run the clinic. Just couldn't do it all. And so I felt like one of the first things we needed to do was double the size of the clinical faculty. And we set upon doing that. Now, there had been some controversies that had taken place before I got here, and the aftermath of that was there were lots of open positions. And so we really concentrated on taking the current faculty and encouraging them to enhance their academic credentials and bringing in people that I felt like somebody from outside of Oklahoma would say, they've hired a good person there. They've hired a person that has written these articles or written this book. And then we proceeded to assign faculty rotations on and off the clinic floor, so they weren't expected to be on the clinic floor and teaching courses, formal class at the same time. However, I expected the clinic to open at 7:30 in the morning and not to close until we were done at night. And that was a change. That was a cultural change, but we all worked through that. And then in research, I felt like if we were not good in cattle and horses, I wasn't going to be deemed very long, because that's what was important to Oklahoma. And so we tried to strengthen and worked on, again, bringing in faculty that were going to actively participate in the research programs, looking at those economically devastating diseases that affected Oklahoma's livestock. And again, we were very fortunate to attract some outstanding people. And I guess if someone looks back and says, what was your biggest accomplishment? I think the quality of the faculty that were brought in and the faculty that were already here really has to be something that people at the veterinary school should take great pride in.
Are there some professors you'd want to point out that you brought in that significant area of research?
Well, we brought in a gentleman named Bill Barrow. Bill is a fabulous researcher and has just gotten, in recent years, a very, very large NIH grant, the largest one in the history of Oklahoma State University. Carrie Pope is a world-renowned toxicologist. and has just done a remarkable job. The attraction of outside funding. Tony Confer and Bob Fulton are two individuals that have dedicated their lives to bovine respiratory disease, and that's a devastating problem for Oklahoma cattlemen. And I don't know that anybody could ever really put a figure on it, but I believe those two gentlemen have saved Oklahomans and the nation's cattle an awful lot of money through their research efforts. Michael Davis. Michael Davis is one of the country's foremost respiratory physiologists. One of the things that Michael does is go to the Iditarod every year to look at the challenges that are faced by the respiratory system of those dogs under obviously very difficult circumstances. Of course, remember, the person's under those same difficult circumstances, and so he's able to relate what he's seeing in those dogs to some of the same challenges that are being felt in human medicine. And now there are others certainly, but those are some really outstanding individuals.
You indicated that teaching has always been a strength historically for the college. Some of the names that you think of during your tenure and earlier and since.
We know one of the first names that comes to mind is Dwayne Peterson. Dwayne Peterson gave the very first lecture in the College of Veterinary Medicine in March of 1948. And he was still on the faculty when I came to Oklahoma State University. And he truly was one of the icons of the university. And certainly there were others. Jonathan Friend, who joined the faculty shortly after the veterinary school opened. He and Dwayne Peterson were anatomy and basic science. Ralph Buckner, Dr. Buckner was a person that had a great love for students and teaching, was beloved by the faculty and by the practitioners of the state. They were truly outstanding, and there were many others. Boy, you just look through the teaching awards that have been given over the years at the veterinary school, and there's some folks that are very dedicated to student learning.
Lester Johnson.
Lester Johnson was, I guess my way to describe Lester is such a gentleman. Unfortunately for me, Lester retired not too long after I came, and so I got to know him more in retirement than I did as a faculty member, but everyone respected and admired him.
Joe, what you've alluded to some of them, but we talk a little bit again about some of the challenges you faced in your tenure and when you came on board?
Well, first of all, the facilities at OSU were pretty marginal. McElroy Hall, which in those days was called the Veterinary Medicine Building, had been built in 1948, and it looked like it had been built in 1948. And the other thing, I guess if you look back and you say, well, what was your legacy at the veterinary school? Mine was women's restrooms. Because in 1948, there were no women in the College of Veterinary Medicine. The women's locker room was a closet. The men's locker room was huge. Well, when I got to Oklahoma State, the class was almost 50% female, and that trend has continued. And so, while I say that jokingly, that was a big challenge. And we were very fortunate to be part of the state's bond issues, and some significant improvements were done in McElroy Hall, but that took time. I would like to think that one of the ways that we were able to build the faculty was through the endowed chairs program. And one of the things that I am very proud of, when I left the veterinary school, the College of Veterinary Medicine had more endowed chairs money than any other college at Oklahoma State. We didn't have as many positions because we tended to use our money and more money in fewer positions. Because I wanted to go out and really attract nationally recognized researchers in those endowed chairs, and you had to have a big chair to do that. You couldn't do that with $1 million chair. The clinic, I felt like, was being run like a private practice. They did not have a lot of specialized equipment. The equipment they did have was antiquated, and improving the physical plan and improving the offerings. So what I wanted, Jerry, is I wanted a practitioner in Oklahoma to refer a case to the veterinary school because we had the best people and the best equipment to meet the needs of that owner, whether that be Mrs. Smith's poodle or Mr. Jones's dairy cow. And quite honestly, there was a long way to go to get there. And all that had to be done mostly through private fundraising efforts. But not much of that had been done. And so you sort of had an open field. The other thing that you realize when you're at the veterinary school is you don't get caught up in OUOSU, because we are the state's College of Veterinary Medicine. And some of our biggest donors would not have given to Oklahoma State, not because they don't like Oklahoma State, but their loyalties were elsewhere. But their loyalties are to animals. And so you really had an advantage of being the state's College of Veterinary Medicine.
Well, Joe, in fundraising, I think that's one of the areas that, as I sort of read the centennial history in the vet college and your tenure, was something you really could hang your hat on, and we had a huge increase in funding. Can you talk a little bit about your strategy for fundraising and maybe some specific fundraising successes?
Well, first of all, I've had the philosophy that if we just treat everybody the same, we won't have to worry about who to be nice to. And so while we were trying to enhance the reputation and the image of the veterinary school, I spent a lot of time in the state. I was very, very fortunate to have Sandy Cotton and John Cathy as our fundraisers. And they were wonderful at opening doors. They were wonderful at paving the way. I realized I had to be the one who asked for the money. And John Cathy especially had so many contacts at foundations, and I felt if we could get in the door, we could sell our story. We also started to pay much more attention to who was coming through our clinic doors. Where were their connections? When Sam Walton's brother Bud showed up, you paid attention.
You knew what the connection was.
You knew what the connection was, exactly. When I got a call from Coach Holder in the middle of the night that Boone Pickens' dog was hemorrhaging. This is before Mr. Pickens had done anything for Oklahoma State. You know who Boone Pickens is, and you know you don't treat those people differently, but you perk up a little bit. You pay more personal attention, perhaps. When Ed Gaylord's horse, #1 stallion, colicked, you know that there's two opportunities here: to save this horse and to make a friend, and someone that could be very helpful to you down the road. One of my best fundraising stories is that I'd gotten a phone call about a gentleman that the veterinary school, before my time, had some positive dealings with the school, and he wanted to know if he could have lunch with me. And I didn't know this, but the foundation had already been working with him. And so I went down, and we met at a restaurant, a barbecue place in Oklahoma City. And he didn't have a belt on when he got out of his truck. He had a piece of wire that held his pants up. And we came in, we had a delightful lunch. Nothing much was said. And not too much longer, he unfortunately passed away and left the veterinary school $7 million. That was Walter Sidlington. And he left Oklahoma State $14 million. And here's a man who had been a dairy farmer his whole life, but his dairy farm was sitting on property near Quail Springs Mall. And so you never know. I became very good friends with Bud Walton, and I'd operate on one of Mr. Walton's horses, dogs one time. And the nature of the dog's injuries were such that I had to put an external device in, ruptured Achilles tendon. I had to put an external, looked like an erector set on his ankle. Well, it came time to take that off, and I called Mr. Walton, and he always answered the phone. I didn't call a secretary, didn't go through an opera. He always answered the phone. And I told him it's time to take the device off, and he said, Dr. Sam had died by this time, and he was now chairman of the board. And he said, I can't get over there. We got a board meeting coming up. And he said, why don't you come over here? And I said, Mr. Walton, that's a long trip for me. Well, making a long story short, they fly the Walmart plane over here. We fly to Bentonville. He comes out to the airport to pick me up in a truck that he couldn't get the driver's door side open. And we did the surgery on the dog at his local veterinarian. And on my way to the airplane back, he gave me an envelope and he said, "Now, don't look at this till you get home." Well, as soon as we got on the airplane, I looked at it. It was full of Walmart stock, and we were able to give that to the foundation, and it was sold. But those are two gentlemen that were just, I mean, you would never know. You would never know. I think we're so fortunate that we have people that are so tied to their animals in Oklahoma. You know, John Cathy, he and I were going through Oklahoma City one time, and he asked me if I wanted to meet Bob Kerr. And I said, "Well, sure, John, who wouldn't?" Well, we'll go meet him. And we pulled in to the Kerr Foundation parking lot, and I'm thinking, we're not going to get in to see Bob Kerr. What is John thinking about? We walked down the hallway, and the receptionist jumped up and ran around and gave John a big hug. And I knew we were going to get in to see Bob Kerr.
And your first clue.
Yeah, and we went in to see him, and I'm thinking, what am I going to talk to him about? And behind his desk was a large picture of a horse named Round Table in the winner's circle. And I knew who Round Table was. He was a very, very famous racehorse. It turned out the Kerr family owned a significant portion of Round Table. And Lou Kerr and I, his widow, we've become fast friends. We go to the horse races together, and they have and continue to be very generous to the College of Veterinary Medicine. So you just never know where those things are going to come from. And I can tell you story after story of people that, especially older veterinarians who are very conservative, who saved their resources, but in the end, they wanted to put those to help a future generation. And much of what you were able to work on as a fundraiser in the College of Veterinary Medicine is not veterinarians, it's the veterinarians' clients. Mm-hmm. And their clients will say to that veterinarian, "You know, I'd like to do something. Can you have any suggestions?" And you want that veterinarian to suggest College of Veterinary Medicine at Oklahoma State University.
Which Joe brings me to the point, to do successful fundraising and those relationships you're going, you have to work with practitioners, with your alumni. Can you share some things? You know, you said earlier that you travel extensively around the state meeting people, but can you tell a little bit about that process and some of your experiences there?
Sure. Well, the first thing I did, and you have to understand, I love and own thoroughbred racehorses. And so the first thing I did was I got the Racehorse Journal from Oklahoma, and everybody that had an ad in there, I went and visited. And I visited people that lived in Randy Gamble. Randy Gamble is a multimillionaire, loves Oklahoma State University. His racing colors are black and orange, has pictures of Pistol Pete or Frank Eaton all over his office, lives in a huge, huge home on a beautiful, beautiful farm in Edmond, all the way to somebody that you think, what am I doing here? But they had an ad in the journal because they had a horse. And I always, when I went to a town, I always went and saw the local veterinarian. Just let them know we were in town, and just to chat about what was the school doing, what can we do to help you. And I did the same thing with the cattle industry. If they had an ad in the Oklahoma Cattlemen's Journal, I went and visited them. And we went to their conventions. We really, under the leadership of Tom Thetford, really tried to enhance the extension program that college was doing. And going out and trying to find out, what is it that you want us to be doing? Oklahoma is a small enough state that you can visit every local association meeting, and you're not driving that far. It's not like Texas or California. And so an opportunity just to get in front of them and to say, I want to hear from you. I'm new. I've never been here. Tell me what you want. And then this will come out wrong, but I was very fortunate that I was reasonably well known nationally as a veterinarian. And so people at least knew who you were when you walked in the door. And there were some practitioners that really took me under their wings: Sam Strom, Joe Howe, Lauren Parker, and I just go down the list, that really introduced me to the practitioners of this state and to the people of this state.
So what was the ties between the college and the racing, horse racing industry in Oklahoma at that time, when we were legalizing racing and betting and?
Yeah, the college, and I wasn't here when that was going on. The college chose to kind of stay out of that fray, and I think where we missed an opportunity, and I'm certainly not being critical of anything, is that many states, when you're getting racing, they will get a portion of the income to go to research, and Oklahoma State did not fight for that. And again, it's easy to say I wasn't here, so I don't know what the circumstances were. I think that once the racing industry was established, and not everything you do is successful. I'll tell you an unsuccessful story I had. I felt like one of the things that we could really do at Remington Park was to build a veterinary hospital, have it on the grounds. And we would have in there equipment that the average practitioner at the racetrack wouldn't have. Ultrasound, radiology equipment, certain surgical opportunities, and so I thought I'm gonna build it. So I went and had a very humbling meeting with Edward DeBartolo. And Mr. DeBartolo, I went in and made a presentation to him, and I asked him for $1.5 million to build a veterinary clinic, and he did not speak the whole time I was making the presentation. And I walked out the door, and the general manager, David Vance, came out and said, "You got your money." Well, some of the practitioners in Oklahoma didn't like that. They thought it was going to be unfair competition for them, especially those who had hospitals that had invested in clinics, and I understand that. And it was enough of a controversy that the president at that time decided we're going to back away and not do this. So not everything you do is successful.
What about you talking about the president? I mean, could you share? You had a fairly long. I guess you're probably one of the longest tenures of the dean in the
Yes.
college, about 15, 16 years.
16 years, yes.
And can you share some of your stories and some of your
Sure.
relationships with university administration?
Yes, of course. Well, one of my favorites was the very first phone call I ever got. It was May 15th. I was in my office. It was 8:10 in the morning, and I got a call from Larry Boger. And he gave me the usual welcome to the university and all. He said, we've had our ups and downs over there, as we've had throughout the university. But there's two things I want you to always remember. If it weren't for money and personnel problems, we wouldn't need a dean. And when times got tough, I always remembered that we wouldn't need a dean if it weren't for those problems. But Dr. Boger, as every president that I had the opportunity and the privilege to serve under, they've been very good to me. They've given me opportunities. They've been supportive of the school. John Campbell's daughter, Karen, had been my intern when I was at Tennessee. So we knew the Campbells and have stayed very close to them over the years. And certainly, David Smedley and Jim Halligan. Jim Halligan, I just think is what I would think of when you look up university president dictionary, and certainly gave me some unique opportunities at Oklahoma State that I would never have had. It is unique being the dean of the veterinary school because, unlike the other deans, you don't really report to the president on paper. You do on paper, but in reality, your expenditures have to be approved by the Board of Regents. And the Board of Regents, so you have to attend all the board meetings, and you have to make all the budget presentations. And that's changed a little bit, I guess, since I've left the school, but it was a unique opportunity to do that, to have your college featured. The presidents, every single one of them, I felt like never had OSU compete against the veterinary school for funding. I mean, they really looked at that what they were two different entities. And now we follow all the policies and procedures of the university, and really anyone coming would never know there's that uniqueness. Only 3 veterinary schools in the country had that arrangement, and that was one of the things that appealed to me when I came here.
Would you step out and say, did you have a favorite president you worked for?
Oh, I really don't think so, Jerry. I'll be honest about that. Because as I think back, every single one of them did some very special things for me.
Maybe Larry, because he hired you.
Well, Larry certainly, and Dr. Boger and I stayed very close after his retirement, and I've been such good friends with his son-in-law, Jim Slimpert, that always kept us in line.
Jim's character. Looking back, your tenure as dean, I mean, any what achievements, innovations at college give you special pride?
Oh, I think certainly the quality of the faculty is the number one thing that I would look at, and the things that go with that. I believe if you're going to have quality programs, you got to have outstanding facilities, you got to have sophisticated equipment, and it's got to be modern equipment, and you have to do everything first class. I believe you've got to have an administration that supports what you're trying to do, but most of all, you got to have quality faculty. And I really believe that through the Endowed Chairs program, and because we were able to focus our research efforts, there were things we didn't do in research, but we were able to focus our efforts, and I think to change the culture that not every faculty member had to do the same thing. That there were going to be faculty members who 100% of what they did was research, and there were going to be ones that 100% of what they did was teach. There were those that did clinical service. Now there were going to be some that did a little bit of everything, but by concentrating those, we were able to recruit faculty into specialty areas. Toxicology is to me was one of our biggest successes because we got Carrie Pope initially, but we were able to hire 2 additional first-rate toxicologists who all they did was research, but we also had Sandra Morgan, and Dr. Morgan handled the teaching program. So you're not pulling away from your research effort in the classroom. And quite honestly, she was a wonderful teacher, did a great job, students loved her, and it allowed our researchers to do research and allowed our best teachers to teach. Now, we weren't able to do that in all areas, but that was the goal, was to say that assignments were going to be different. Everybody didn't have to fit into the same cubby holes. And then they were evaluated for promotion and tenure and salary based upon their assignments and how they did.
Any favorite memories, unforgettable events, stories that you can share with me?
Jerry, there's so many. I wouldn't know where to begin. I started with the Boone Pickens story. I got a phone call in the middle of the night from Mike Holder saying that Boone Pickens' dog was bleeding to death. Every time he opened his mouth, blood ran out his nose. And I said, well, Coach Holder, what can we do? Well, they want to come to Stillwater. And so they brought that dog from Amarillo that night, flew it up on the plane to Stillwater. And I guess it got here, it was 4 or 5 in the morning by the time it got here. And they were right. Every time he opened his mouth, blood poured out his nose. And make a long story short, we operated on him, and he had bitten a porcupine quill, and it went through his mouth and stuck his carotid artery. And we were able to repair that. But it came time for the dog to go home. And I called Mr. Pickens. And again, I talked to Mr. Pickens. And I called him and I said, Mr. Pickens, tell me what we need to send the dog home. And he said, well, we just can't get up there right now. He said, you call Holder up and tell him to bring it. And I said, Mr. Pickens, I don't feel like I call Coach Holder. No, that's not, you're right. We'll make some arrangements. Well, it wasn't much longer. Coach Holder called me and said, I'll be able to get that dog.
Wise choice of my experience.
Absolutely. I got a phone call from Tony Thomas. Dr. Thomas is a wonderful veterinarian in Midwest City. Yeah, I mean, a person that not just in Oklahoma, but throughout the nation is known for his leadership. And he said, listen, I've got a client here. I want you to come down and see. He said, she's kind of a, I've learned, Jerry, if you're poor, you're crazy. If you're rich, you're eccentric. Well, she was eccentric. And so before I could get down there, she had been taken out of her home by the authorities and placed in an assisted living situation, and unfortunately passed away a few days after that. But the reason they did that is she was living with 150 dogs. And the UPS man, when he delivered a package to her door, the odor was so overwhelming because 75 of the dogs lived in her home. And she also had a large number of cats, and when the authorities came to remove her from the home for health purposes, they went next door, and the home next door was full of cats that she purchased. She would go to the Humane Society and get dogs that were scheduled to be euthanized. She would find animals that didn't have homes, and she, in her estate, left the veterinary school the funds to build what's now called the Cone Shelter at Oklahoma State University. And it was a shelter that was originally built to house her dogs, and we kept her dogs throughout their life. A very nice endowment was set up, and that's a very unique facility for the university, for the veterinary school. It's a beautiful facility. It's a very modern housing area. Our provost told me a cute story about it. Our provost, her husband has two Bichon Frigies that he's very attracted to, and you may know they're little white dogs. And one of the things the Cone Shelter does is it will provide boarding services for faculty. It's faculty and staff animals. And John, her husband, had taken those dogs to the Cone Shelter to be housed while he and provost were going to be out of town. And he came back to get the dogs, went in and got them, paid his bill, and was walking the dogs to the car. And as he opened the car door, the two dogs turned around and ran back into the shelter. And I said, well, Johnny, that's a mixed blessing.
Great
they were
story.
well treated, and they loved it there. He said, yeah, but I'm their dad, we've had just great. I got to meet people. I was back at Saratoga Racetrack. I happened to be involved with a syndicate that owned a bunch of racehorses, and we were going to run at Saratoga Racetrack, and it was that's in New York, and I was back there for our partnership meeting, and Rick Pitino was in that syndicate. Now he owned a bigger share than I did, but and I was the only non-Italian in the syndicate. Our trainer was John Paracella. The syndicate manager was Frank Detondo. Wonderful. They were just wonderful people. And John Paracella, our trainer, asked me if I'd like to meet Nick Zito. Well, he might as well have asked me if I wanted to meet Mickey Mantle. I mean, Nick Zito is one of the most famous horse trainers in all the world. And so, here's my right arm. I'd love to meet Nick Zito. So we go back to meet Nick Zito. And again, it's like, to me, I'm meeting a huge celebrity. He's showing us these horses that I knew every one of them. And the trainer turned to me and said, hey, I got to talk to Nick a second. Would you mind waiting for me? Well, it's starting to sprinkle. So I get up under the eaves of the stall, and there's a guy standing next to me who's apparently an Arab. And we get to talking, and I'm talking about what I do. And he said, well, would you take a look at a horse of mine? Oh boy.
Here we go again.
Here we go. And they get this horse out, and the horse has got on his halter his name. And I thought, this horse won the Illinois Derby. Alexander, stand up a little straight, natural selection was a horse's name, and the man's name was Mohammed Mubarak. Buckram Oak is one of the most wealthiest horse farms in America. And Mr. Mubarak trained for the Sheikh of Dubai. and this was their horse. This is one of their big horses. Well, I won't bore you with all the details, but this horse had liver disease, and it was pretty apparent from looking at him. And I told Mr. Mubarak, I said, why don't you let me refer you to Cornell University? You know, they're a few hours up the road. Well, it was the last day of the meet. We're leaving. We're getting ready to go to Gulfstream to race in Miami. I said, well, you know, you're going to go right by the University of Florida. Let me call them and get you an appointment. This horse needs to go in, and they have a liver biopsy and find out what's wrong with him. He said, well, are you near Lexington? Well, to make a long story short, they shipped that horse to Oklahoma State University. Yeah. And our faculty did a wonderful job with him.
Great.
And the entourage that showed up with him was pretty impressive. The plane that flew him in here was pretty impressive. And it was, it was great. And, you know, there have been other things that didn't generate you a lot of notoriety in terms of finances, but they bought you a lot of goodwill. We had an incident where a tractor trailer was stopped in southeastern Oklahoma, and the tractor trailer was full of box turtles. And these box turtles were being smuggled into Florida to be sold as pets, and that's against the law. You cannot take a natural resource. Well, unfortunately, the turtles had been kept in that boxcar long enough that they were suffering from vitamin A deficiency because there was no sunlight. Mm-hmm. Their eyes were running and what have you. And so turtles were confiscated. There were 75 of them, I believe, and they were all sent to the veterinary school. Well, that year, Jerry, Oklahoma State had 3 presidents or former presidents on the campus: Jimmy Carter, Gerald Ford, and George Bush. And they had a very difficult time getting TV coverage for them because it was a long way and what have you. We had every TV station in Oklahoma City and Tulsa for 7 days filming those turtles, interviewing the students, you know, talking about what happened. I mean, it just, you know, those things just get a life of their own. And it was great publicity. It was great for the students, and so you never know.
Well, I know one special memory for you has got to be your Distinguished Service Award.
Yes.
That came out in 1995, the Oklahoma Veterinary Medical Association.
Right. Yep.
That had to be pretty special for you.
It was very special for me. That's an award that's given to someone that gives of their time and efforts outside the practice of veterinary medicine. And I have been privileged to be associated with Special Olympics International since 1977. And that interest continues today. And I've been involved with Special Olympics in 4 different states now. And Oklahoma has the best program in the world, and I'm very proud to be on their board and to serve with that. But, and it's one of those charities and one of those activities that you get far more out of than you put into it. And it has been, it's been very special to me.
What, some of the relationships that you talked about that were awarded recognition from the Oklahoma Veterinary Medical Association, I guess is a recognition of all the many years of activities, you know, with practitioners, with people out in the field, and it sort of recognizes that, and I think it's quite an accomplishment.
Well, I would like to think so. I love veterinarians, and I love people, and I love people that have animals, and I think for me, something that really helped me is, first of all, I actually own horses. I mean, I'm not telling somebody something that they don't know that I'm experiencing myself. And when they talk to me, I know, because I've been there, you know. I know what it's like to go out and find your best horse lame, or to have your trainer call and say, we got a problem. And then we also raise and show golden retriever dogs. And so I had an opportunity to be at dog shows and to meet the dog owning public. And again, you're one of them. And I think that's just, people think that's pretty special, and I think it's pretty special. And I enjoy, like I say, I enjoy people's company. And I always felt that the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, and I had two wonderful ones in Mac Waller and Michael Lorenz. They really were the inside deans of the veterinary school. They took care of the students and the curriculum and admissions and academic standards and the things that are so important. My job was to get resources, whether that were friends, cases, finances. That was my job, and you can't do that. And I miss Billy Hooper. Billy Hooper was in between Mike Lorenz and Mac Roller, and they were just so talented, and they really ran the school day to day. And because I didn't spend a lot of time in the office.
How do you feel about the college now, Joe, where it's going under, Dean Michael Lorenz's leadership?
I've tried to stay away for a lot of reasons. First of all, you need to know that Mike and I have known each other. He was leaving Cornell University when I got there in 1976. And so we've known each other as friends and colleagues for a long time. And I just think the world of him. I think Mike's doing a great job as the dean. His challenges are different than mine. He faces some issues that I didn't have to face, and I guess I faced some that he didn't have to face. And I think the school right now is going through some strategic planning and some soul searching and trying to see just where they're going to land. I think that there were some programs that I wanted to focus on and did that today are not being focused on, but there are others that are. And so I think each administration has to have a very unique, their own style, and that's one of the reasons that unless Mike is asked, I don't interfere, because I don't need to be going over there. And the same is true in the private sector. If I get phone calls from people that want to know something about the veterinary school, good or bad, they don't need to talk to me. And I think that Mike has put together a great administrative team over there, and is just moving the college forward.
Do maybe a final question. Thinking back over your years there, your experience, how much you enjoyed it and loved it, and relationships. How do you hope people remember Dean Joe Alexander? How do you want to be remembered?
I hope they remember me as a person who really cared about having a school that was viewed as being the best it could be, whether that was the teaching, the research, or the service program, and one that first of all served the needs of the people of Oklahoma, and second of all was an institution that contributed to what was going on around the world.
Well, I guess the question I got then is, why did you leave the deanship?
Okay, well, I've asked myself that before.
Somewhat facetiously, but I know, so I guess in 2001, your alma mater, your university, needs you in another administrative position. Can you share with us?
Well, you tell about stories that have the way they go. I got a call from Dr. Halligan, and he asked me if I would come over to Whitehurst, and he asked me to come over after 5 o'clock. And so I went over, and I saw Dr. Keener coming down the hallway, and I thought, they're going to fire me. What's going wrong? Well, the news was worse. No, Dr. Halligan and Dr. Keener at that time felt there needed to be some changes in the administration of the research program.
Was vice president.
Mark Hughes, provost.
Provost.
He was provost and executive vice president. And asked me if I'd be willing to take a 6-month leave of absence from the veterinary school, because my intentions were always to return to veterinary school. Well, some things moved along. There was some financial challenges, and the university decided they could not fill that position for a year, and so I agreed to stay another 6 months, and then another 6 months, and then you may remember 2 things happened. One was that Harry Birdwell was appointed athletic director. And Dr. Birdwell had been the vice president for business and external relations, and that included government affairs. And when Dr. Birdwell went over to athletic administration, Dr. Halligan asked us to take over government affairs. And I got the title Director of External Affairs in addition to the Vice President's position. And then, of course, Dr. Halligan announced his retirement. And everything was put on hold until we got a new president. So that 6 months stretched out for quite a while. And as I looked at it, I felt like Mike Lorenz had been the dean for almost 3 years now. And for me to go back and was maybe not the best thing for the college. And maybe this was a time, it'd been 16 years, was to try something different. And when I was vice president for research, Jerry, I got to meet people and be involved in things that I would never have ever done. And then when we took over legislative affairs, that just expanded.
Could you share maybe what your major responsibilities in that position were?
Our major responsibilities under Dr. Halligan and under Dr. Smedley were to promote what we would call OSU's Directed of Federal Appropriations agenda. Now, if Nevada gets it or Kansas, it's pork barrel. But for us, it was Directed Federal Appropriations. And it was basically to get federal dollars, non-competitive federal dollars, coming to Oklahoma State University. And that involves forging a working relationship with our congressional delegation and with their staff. And so I did not know hardly anyone in our congressional delegation except I had served as the Payne County campaign chair for Bill Brewster when he ran for Congress. And so Bill was able to open some doors for me, and so our job is to promote that agenda for Oklahoma State. We don't do the projects. Projects come to us from the colleges. Our job is to go get the funding for them.
You're funding primarily for research dollars.
Well, for everything. For instance, I think one of the best accomplishments in recent years was the multimodal facility. The multimodal facility is all federal dollars. We got it over a 4 or 5 year period of time. At the time, we were very fortunate because Senator Inhofe was chairman of the highway bill. And I learned that they can trade lots of things if you control people's highways. And the senator was very supportive of the multimodal facility. So it's not just and now one of our big focuses is on Ponca City and the UML, the University Multispectral Laboratory and its sensor program. Those are directed appropriations. I think one of OSU's most significant contributions is protective armor for our troops. They come out of Donna Branson's laboratory. That's all federal money. That's all directed appropriations. And to me, it's the poster child for us because it started with an idea. It started with a talented faculty. Federal dollars were put in. They were successful. A manufacturer in Pauls Valley makes the armor, and now that's protecting the limbs of our troops overseas. And that's being expanded now to help first responders. So that was our principal role in that regard. And then at the state level, it was to try to support greater money and funding for higher education. Something else happened in the interim to me that again was a great experience, and that is when Governor Brad Henry appointed me to his cabinet as Oklahoma Secretary for Science and Technology. And much of what we're trying to do there dovetails directly with what the universities are trying to do. The difference is you got to be careful. You're representing all the institutions, but what's good for one is good for another. And it was again one of those opportunities to meet people and to do things that I would just never have gotten to do as dean of veterinary school.
Now, you're sort of the first position, vice president for research, and then you tagged on government relations.
Director of External Relations. Right.
And then that morphed into your current title is?
Yeah, well, what happened, Jerry, was that back in the 70s, the Oklahoma legislature had passed legislation that allowed universities to form not-for-profit foundations that could do things outside the normal channels of the university, but no state money could be used. And out of that grew what was called the Education and Research Foundation. And it really grew out for two reasons. One was OSU had enjoyed and did enjoy for a long time a very large grant from NASA. And it had to do with teachers teaching the space program in classrooms, but it involved having to pay salaries in all 50 states, to buy automobiles in all 50 states, to buy teaching supplies in all 50 states. And a teacher in Massachusetts got paid a different scale than one did in New Mexico. And so the NASA program ran through what was then called ERF. Also at that time, the university had the opportunity to buy Cowboy Mall, but did not want to spend state resources. And so ERF borrowed the money and went into the landlord business and continued to do that. Of course, that has now become Northern Oklahoma College, but in those days, it was restaurants and computer stores and pizza places and a Greek restaurant and an old movie theater. And so as vice president for research, you were automatically president of ERF. Well, when Brad Henry came in as governor, he charged the universities with being the engines of economic development, and each institution was to form a separate economic development organization. The University of Oklahoma did what they called the Center for Wealth Creation, and Dr. Smedley formed what was then called the Education, Research, and Economic Development Foundation, EREDF. And we were able, I was very fortunate that, because I was thinking of leaving Oklahoma State. I didn't feel like I could go back to veterinary school. I really didn't want to be vice president for research any longer. That was really not my forte, although I enjoyed the people and everything. And then Dr. Smedley offered me the presidency of that and asked if we would continue to do federal government relations. And so EREDF over a few months became a very cumbersome acronym, and so it was changed now to its current Center for Innovation and Economic Development. And so I'm the president of that and the director of external relations.
Joe, we were just talking about some of the major responsibilities in your new position there. Some of the significant challenges that you've had in that area, and then you kind of speak to maybe, and I know we're speaking two different areas here, that your vice presidency, and then moving into your current role as president of the foundation.
Well, I think that our biggest challenge when I went into Vice President of Research's office was to try to restore confidence and fiscal accountability in the office. Some funds had been used in a manner that some folks thought was not appropriate. Budgets were in the red. There was a lot. There was just to try to get everybody on the same page, get the budget balanced. Those were really our big challenges. I think the infrastructure was already in place for the research program, but there had been a lack of confidence, perhaps is the best way to put it, and I felt like we needed to get that back. And people were very supportive and helped me a great deal, and we had some lean times because there was several $1 million that we had to make up over a 2-year period of time in order to balance the budget. The other big challenge for me was my whole life had been in veterinary medicine. I had never been involved in the other aspects of the university's research program, and so, I'd be sitting in there and there'd be a physicist telling me about his research, and it took about 30 seconds and I didn't know what they were talking about. And so you had to sort of broaden your thought process about what was important and what people were doing. And we had a little bit of that, but it was it was very interesting opportunity for me to learn about the university and to meet some of the wonderful scientists at this university who I never would have known. And we had some areas at this university that I thought were really top drawer. And one of the things that, as the vice president for research, that I would look back on with a lot of pride is that we were very instrumental, and we being Oklahoma State University, and I think our office, at getting the state to initiate a $34 million bond program, $17 million of which came to Oklahoma State to enhance research facilities. And as I look around the campus, some of the research facilities today that we point to as some of our best and most modern came out of that $17 million. And some of the deans were able to take those funds and enhance them and what have you, but we were able to use that money to build research laboratories that were very unique to Oklahoma State University.
Joe, was it true there were some, let's say, morale problems, a bit of frustrations with the research and being appropriately rewarded on our campus?
Well, I think there was, Jerry. I think people, you always have those folks that feel that they're looking at their neighbor and thinking they've got a better shake than they have. And researchers, when you go into research, you have to accept that you're not necessarily going to get the Christmas vacation off because your research is going to continue. You're not necessarily going to be successful. It's a roller coaster. One year you're on top, you've got funding, your lab's moving along, it's going here, and then that project finishes. You miss a couple grants, as everyone does, and you're back down again. And so it's pretty unique in research. And I feel like that partly because of personalities, but partly just because of the culture of the university, that researchers didn't feel like their efforts were appreciated here. That we were an extension and service institution. You heard people say, "Well, you're the biggest junior college in the state," things like that, and I think that's all gone. I think this is looked at now as a very committed research institution. Now, we have a long way to go to get to be a Tier 1 research institution. And that's solved by money. But I think that a person coming in from the outside that looked at one of our colleges and what they were accomplishing in research would maybe perhaps be critical of what we were accomplishing until they got to see the resources we have to work with. And I think once they saw what was being accomplished with what we were able to provide, it's pretty impressive. And I think that's true lots of places in this university. And I think the challenges of a research program are always in what's next. Wayne Gretzky said, success is not knowing where the puck is, it's knowing where the puck's going to be next. Well, I think OSU is starting to look at those things in their sensor program, their biofuels program, that there are things that we're finding out where the puck is going to be next. And by putting in the faculty talent and the equipment and the facilities, we'll be the ones that are going to get the research programs in those areas.
It appears the university's made a commitment, some of those things that they moved, if not two, toward a Tier 1 research institution. They've set some marks out there to achieve. And I think what the Reward, Restore, Grow program, would you care to speak to any of those?
Well, I think that, I think to me, what this university is done is moving toward a little bit. And maybe I'd like it to move faster, but that is, we're finding areas that we feel like we can be the best in. Jim Halligan and I, when I was vice president of research, there were these interlegislative studies that were done over the holidays, over the summer vacations. And they were unrelated. I mean, one would be on rural economic development, the other would be on something to do with teacher certifications. But we had to be at them and always were asked to make a presentation. And OSU's presentation would always focus on the subject at hand. The University of Oklahoma's presentation was always the Weather Center. Didn't make care what the subject was. They had made a huge commitment to the Weather Center, and look how that's paid off today. The Noble Foundation has made a huge commitment not to plant biology, but to plant genomics and to biofuels crops. And the best scientists in the world in that area can be found at the Nobel Foundation. Now, don't go down there to try to find a scientist that does research in something else. They're not there. And I feel like we're starting to build some of that critical mass here in nanotechnology and advanced materials and sensors and biofuels, in infectious diseases. I think we're building those kinds of research niches. And it's gonna, it takes the recruitment, not just of that major person, but it takes the recruitment of a lot of people that contribute. When I came to Oklahoma State in 1985, the laser center was all I heard about. And there was a faculty member, Dick Powell, who was making great strides in the laser center. And it was. I mean, there were wonderful facilities. Dick Powell left, and you can't find the laser center. Those facilities are being used for other things because we didn't have enough depth in laser research. The director of the OU Weather Center, he was a wonderful guy. He could leave tomorrow. They're not going to miss a beat because there's enough depth there. And they've got a reputation that there's an awful lot of people who like to be director of the OU Weather Center. And I think OSU is starting to build on those kinds of things.
Joe, in your position as president, for the Center for Innovation and Economic Development, can you share a little bit your responsibilities or what your primary focus
Sure.
in that role is?
Yeah, our primary focus falls into several categories. The one big general is economic development.
Mm-hmm.
Our role is to try to enhance the economy of the state of Oklahoma through working with entrepreneurs and businesses to enhance the recruitment of them to Oklahoma, their retention in Oklahoma, and their growth in Oklahoma. And I'm very fortunate to have two very talented vice presidents in Tom Gray and Glenn Friedman. And we've been able, or through their leadership, to put in place several programs that directly impact the economy of our state. I'll just mention a few of them. We have an opportunity and have successfully competed to be part of what's called the USDA revolving loan program. We can borrow $750,000 at 1% interest for 30 years from the federal government. We can then loan that money out at any interest rate we think it'll bear. We're limited to towns of 20,000 people or less, and we're limited to $150,000 in any one loan. We work with the local banks as a partner with them. We have a wonderful loan committee made up of the presidents of the three banks here in Stillwater, three of the banks here in Stillwater. But we're able to go out and give a small business a 4 or 5% loan that they can then use to get additional loans and expand their business. We take an equity interest in that business, and we expect that loan to be repaid. Now, the interest difference between the 1% and say the 5 or 6% that we're charging loses its identity. And we can use that for anything that we see fit. And what we're hoping to do is to build a big enough fund that we can invest in early faculty inventions, ones that haven't gotten there. They're high risk. We wouldn't want to risk state money in them. But this is money that if we lose it, we lost it. But maybe we promote a successful effort. We have a program that is OSU's largest federal program right now in terms of money received, and that's called ASSET. I forget what that stands for, but ASSET basically says that Tinker Air Force Base has a lot of airplanes, and I don't know anything about airplanes, but say they were meant to fly for 30 years. Now they have to fly for 50. Mm-hmm. Well, their parts are wearing out. Well, the Boeings and the Lockheed Martins that made that part, they don't make it anymore because it's so small. Maybe it's 20,000 bolts and washers. Maybe it's 1,500 fans.
Well, there are a lot of Oklahoma manufacturers that can make that. And it would be a big deal to a small town to get a contract to make 25,000 bolts and washers. But they don't know how to compete for that contract. So what the asset program does, it funds our going in, doing the paperwork for them, and it looks like War and Peace, believe me, doing the paperwork for them and allowing them to successfully submit a bid for those parts. Now, they don't always win, but once they've got their foot in the door, then they can move forward from there. The other thing that the project funds is it funds having their product certified. The Army wants to know if you're going to make these bolts and nuts and washers that they fit and they meet our quality. And so that fund goes in and certifies those. We have a program that works directly with entrepreneurs that think they have an idea for a product. Many times, I think the best service we do is we show them that it's just not economically feasible for them to do that. But we do business plans for these people. Tom Gray especially is very familiar with the loan programs that are available and the investment programs through the state. He's formed a network within the private sector of venture funds, because that's really what you need. You need angel venture money. They're going to invest in your invention, and we're able to certify that, or to put the good housekeeping seal of approval on someone's invention through our engineers at OSU that we think this thing will work, and hopefully that helps them then to get venture money.
So what about the reverse side of that? What about faculty that patent things through the university, or the faculty member of the university?
Same principle.
We work with them and try to take that to a commercial level.
Absolutely. And
how would that process work?
Well, with how that process works, it depends upon what the faculty member has and what they want to do. We have an example where a faculty member in the College of Agriculture in their Ag and Food Products Center developed a system to test the microbiology in foods. One of the first contracts, for instance, they got was somebody decided that when you go in your grocery store and there's an apple pie sitting out, is that sitting out growing bacteria? And so they had a contract with Bama Pie to test that and show that it was safe. And, well, they decided to spin off their company. Came to us. We were able to make them a low interest loan program because they located outside the city limits of Stillwater in Payne County. We were able to make a direct investment because we have a venture fund. We invest in some companies. And they now have a very successful company, Food Protech, which is located just outside of Stillwater. They employ about 20 people, and they have a going program. There are other faculty that what we try to do is to help them find venture money, because it's really what they need. They need what people call the valley of death, the time when you've invented something, and you've invented it on the workbench, but you've got to take it from this scale to a big scale. And how do I do that? That may be what we try to get federal money for. It may be money we invest directly. We try to work with student entrepreneurs to help them to grow their companies. And then we try, Jerry, to make some direct investments. There's a company that was in the incubator out of Marine Technology called Engius. I don't know where that name comes from, but I assume it's a Greek god of some sort. But Engius had a very unique product. It's a sensor that will tell you when cement's cured. So you embed that in a bridge, and instead of having to drill a core, send it off to some lab, and 10 days later find out the cement wasn't cured, got to wait longer. Well, the 10 days is gone, got to drill another. It can tell you immediately. It can also tell you if the mixture you paid for is what it is. Well, they had grown out of the incubator and were getting ready to move to Tulsa. and we felt they had a very bright future. About that same time, the Gateway East building, which is located out east of town behind the John Deere plant, came on the market. And we bought that building and we moved Engis into there. And they rent that building from us. The company's continue to grow. They've stayed here in Stillwater. And so we try to make a direct investment in that regard.
How important is that in attracting bright, future potential researchers and knowing these stories? Does it help to attract faculty?
Oh, I hope
from the
so.
state?
And of course, the people of Oklahoma, not that many years ago, passed a state question that actually allowed faculty to benefit from their research. And prior to that, they couldn't. And that was a huge obstacle to get over, because faculty who have good ideas should be rewarded for those. And under Steve McKeever's leadership, the intellectual property office here has expanded and it is doing a great job at working with people. And I think also because we're a separate, not-for-profit, we can have some failures and it not reflect poorly on the university. And when you're dealing with startup companies, you're going to have failures. They're not all going to succeed. And we've had some successes and we've had some failures.
You've learned from those.
You learn from those. And so that's really what we do, a lot of that in economic development. And we also provide a grants writer that the university can take advantage of. And just recently, this person wrote a grant, for instance, that we don't do the grant because we're not going to be hiring scientists. We write the grant and get the scientists then to be the PI. And there's a talented person over in the College of Education, Steve Marks. Steve has been involved with the space program for his whole life, I guess, in the educational side of it. And we just got $800,000 grant, $800,000 a year for 5 years for a teacher in space program. We don't run the grant. We run the grant administratively, but Steve is the PI. And so we're trying to be a partner with the university. We don't want to duplicate what the university's doing.
Joe, do you have any specific goals, future goals out there for your area for the center?
Well, I would hope, Jerry, that the center will, first of all, continue its philosophy that we have one client, that's Oklahoma State University. I hope that our programs will mature to where we're contributing more and more to the university in the areas we're responsible for. And I don't know what those are going to be. President Hargis, of course, comes out of the private sector. I think he's going to have some different goals and missions for us. One of the things that we hope to be very involved in is the university's creativity project. And that's going to take innovative thought. It's also going to take resources. So my goal would be for us to be able to be a financially independent organization, and we don't take any state money now, that our programs will grow, that they're generating resources, that we're actually giving cash, if you will, back to the university. And most of all, we're promoting this university as a caring institution who's trying to improve the quality of life of everybody in the state of Oklahoma.
How important are these goals to the mission of Oklahoma State University?
Well, I would hope that as a land grant institution, we have long had that as our mission. And the big revolution, I think, that's taking place is when people thought about land grant and its outreach, they thought about agriculture. And that model now is not being diminished in agriculture, but it's a greater model for the whole university. And whether that's in engineering or education or human environmental sciences or veterinary medicine, people are more cognizant that we have to be seen as being critical to the future of this state if we expect to continue to get the support of the taxpayers.
Well, what do you think about, you were talking about President Hargis earlier. You had a chance to, he's still fairly new on the job, but how are you viewing his presidency and his perception of your role and your foundation's role?
Yeah, well, we, just to let you know where we interact, we are separate from the university. We are governed by a board separate from the OSU Board of Regents. The board is chaired by President Hargis. The vice chair is the provost, Marlene Strait. The treasurer is the vice president for business, David Bosserman. So we are governed by the university, as we should be. And so President Hargis is very important to us because he's our chairman. My observation has been that when he was named president, people in the state instantly recognized who we'd gotten here. Whether it's through his TV show, his private sector activities, I know that people recognize the quality of person that was coming into this university. And I think that he's a person who 20 years ago would perhaps not have been the best choice for president because presidents were more inside people. Presidents really did back then what provosts do now. Now presidents, their job is outside the university. Their job is working with external constituencies, whether they be donors, alumni, boards of regents, legislators. We couldn't have a better person doing that. I was at a dinner at the president's home, and you have these icebreakers, and people asked you about what you were doing, and he got to talking about how he'd gone to law school. He'd gone to law school because he had a grandfather, I believe, that was a judge, and he said, his grandfather loved the law. He just loved the law. He said, I liked the law, but I didn't love the law. He said, I went to banking, and I liked banking, but didn't really love banking. It was a good job, but he said, you know what it did? It gave me the opportunity to be involved in civic activities. And I think when people think of him, that's what they think of. They think of the MAPS program. They think of the creativity program. They think of United Way, State Chamber, Oklahoma City Chamber. And so I believe that he came in here with an instant reputation for public service. And he's carried that on. He'll learn, and he will learn about the university. He's got a very good provost. I know he'll let her do her job. And so I don't know that the university could have made a better selection at this time in its history. And presidents fit different times. I think that John Campbell. I think John Campbell was a visionary president. John was a little bit ahead of himself at times. The university, after John finished his tenure, needed someone to come in and put the family back together, restore the confidence, and we could not have a better person than Jim Halligan. And so I think presidents fit times, and I think at this time, Burns Hargis fits Oklahoma State University.
Phil, what do you think about all the new construction and renovation on campus, current and proposed over the next 10, 15 years?
We're going to change the face of this university, and I know facilities don't make programs, people do, but facilities show your commitment. And I know that much of what we've seen in the public's view has been in athletics, and certainly what has been done over there and what will be done over there is tremendous. But we're building the biggest science building in Oklahoma. We're renovating historic buildings, Murray Hall, the Old Central, that are not going to lose their character, but are going to be facilities that are going to be modern and house faculty. And I think it's the growth is great. It's tremendous.
What we talked about Ben Pickens earlier,
right?
But and we think about athletics, but his recent gift, his matching gift, if you will, on chairs, endowed chairs, is that a boost in the arm for research and research attracting research faculty?
I don't know that he could have made a more significant gift. I'm a little disappointed that the state chose not to continue the endowed chairs program after July 1st. But Mr. Pickens' gift allowed Oklahoma State to at the very least triple its money, and then after that to double its money, because he will continue to match out of his fund private sector gifts. And one of the things that we have to remember about endowed chairs is you only spend 5% of the interest. So you need to have a big chair to really go out and get the kinds of people that you want to attract here.
And that's not $1 million chair.
That's not $1 million. You know, that's a $5 million chair. And with that, you'll bring in, and those people will attract people. And if you attract the right kinds of people, they will more than pay for themselves with the grants, research grants, and contracts that they'll attract to your university.
There was a great jump start.
It was a great jump start. And you know, people forget that the Boone Pickens School of Geology. You know, I'd love to be dean of the veterinary school these days, given his wife Madeline and her great love for animals. I just think that there's going to be lots of opportunities to work with Mrs. Pickens, because she has a great love affair with animals, and is a person that is willing to get out on the front lines to make things better. And so I think there's a great resource.
So, switching back just a minute to a question I meant to ask you,
Okay.
and I think got out of sequence. But in your external relations role, in terms of government relations, can you share a little bit about the importance of engaging with the Alumni Association, with Cowboys for Higher Education, and share a little bit how that works?
Yeah, you know, I guess to me, the love of an alumni for its university is what really makes a university great. And I think that OSU has some really devoted alumni. It reminds me when I was at Cornell University. I mean, Cornell alumni, you think they know it's the only institution on earth is Cornell University. And every time I visited Auburn, I felt the same way, you know. And I think we have that at Oklahoma State. I think people have a great love for this university. I also think they want to see this university get better. And I feel like our Alumni Association is trying to utilize their connections. The group does a great job of looking at who are the OSU alums that have been elected to political office. Not to say that they're going to do something special for OSU, but that they're going to recognize the importance of this institution and its role in this great state in terms of education. You know, I tease my friend Doug Cox, who's in the legislature. He's the only physician in the legislature. There are 3 veterinarians in the legislature, and we have never had a veterinarian in the legislature up until 6 years ago. Now we have 3, and so I'm telling the veterinarians are taking over the legislature. But what a great opportunity for when issues related to animals comes before the legislature to have 3 experts sitting right there. And who does the legislature go to when they have a question? Jim Halligan, as a senator, is going to be the education senator. And I think the Cowboys for Higher Education, we've certainly had a great opportunity to work with them in hosting receptions for supporters of the university before some of our football games this fall. And we're able, I think, to get people here for those that if it weren't for the Cowboys call, I can call and ask them. But if one of their constituents calls and asks them, it means a whole lot more. And I feel like we need to look for more and more ways for the Cowboys to be directly involved in the agenda for Oklahoma State. And you do have to be a little careful because the Cowboys are a diverse group and they're not always going to agree with your agenda.
And represent both parties?
It represents both parties. You know, OSU may feel like there's a tuition issue, and there may be some people who think, no, you're not going to raise tuition. Others who say, yes, you have to address that. So there's always going to be, but I think the important thing is open discussion and an access to them when you go to the legislature, or when you can take a Larry Briggs or the other Cowboys with you. It just means a whole lot more. That this is not somebody who's down here because they happen to work at that institution. They're here because they're my constituent and because they think this is important.
They're not employees of the university.
They're not
right?
employees of the university.
Big deal. Like I said, they're constituents, and they're voting constituents.
Exactly. And they're supporters of this institution and supporters of that legislator.
Well, Joe, we've talked about a lot of things today, and I appreciate it. And you've covered
My
a lot of
pleasure.
things. I'd leave you with one last question.
All right.
What excites you most about the future of Oklahoma State University? Or maybe there's more than one thing.
Well, what excites me the most about, I believe that this university, if it continues on the path it's going, is going to become recognized nationally for the things that we already know that they do within the state. And I really believe that's going to happen. I believe that in what Larry Boger used to say, the more people know about us, the better they like us. And to do that, we're going to have to establish certain areas that when people think about those areas, they think about Oklahoma State University. They think about where are the people that are making the greatest difference in these areas, and guess what? They're in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And I think this university is heading in that direction.
It's great.
Thank
Joe,
you,
what have we not covered?
No,
What have we not asked we should have asked?
No, I don't.
Okay. It's some stories you can tell us. So you probably got a lot of stories we didn't cover.
We do a lot of stories, that's for sure, Jerry, but they're ones that you look back on, you think how fortunate you were to be part of them.
Mhm.
I got a call from a guy named Jerry Hagee. I knew who Jerry Hagee was, but I found out that Jerry Hagee owned what was called the Arbuckle Wilderness. The Arbuckle Wilderness had been just awarded Oklahoma's #1 tourism attraction. But Jerry Hagee wanted to sell it. And so he called me up and he told me that he wanted to make a donation of $1 million to the veterinary school. So I went down to visit with him. Well, what it turned out was he wanted to sell me the Arbuckle Wilderness for $2 million, even though it was valued at $1 million. And I just told him I didn't really think that was what I wanted to be doing. And so, but it wasn't too much longer that he did put it on the market. And because of its location and its importance to the city of Davis, a group called the Murray County Economic Development Authority bought Arbuckle Wilderness. And my good friend Danny Hilliard, who's now the legislative person for the University of Oklahoma, was at that time majority leader in the Oklahoma House of Representatives. And Jerry notioned that since they were now owned by a not-for-profit organization, that the veterinary school ought to get down there and help those people figure out how to run this place. So we went down and we went on a tour with the manager who they had retained. And they had a stockade fence that had a bunch of elk in it. And I asked the man what those elk, well, he said those elk weren't feeling very well. And so we went over to look at them and there was a dead elk in there. And it had a sore right behind its jaw, which is just about pathognomonic for tuberculosis. And that was the worst diagnosis they could have. And we diagnosed tuberculosis. And the whole park was quarantined for 2 years while we cleaned up the tuberculosis. Well, to clean it up, you have to test the animals. And you haven't lived till you're trying to test a giraffe or you're trying to test an African wildebeest for tuberculosis. And it was one of those devastating disease epidemics that was just a great case study. I mean, students got exposed to things they would never, ever been exposed to. Unfortunately, an awful lot of autopsies were done, but they got to do those autopsies. And we were credited with saving the Arbuckle Wilderness. It's now in private hands and doing very well. But it was such a unique opportunity to be there and to be part of trying to keep that for Oklahoma. And at the same time recognizing that these people didn't get state money. I mean, they had to keep the doors open and keep tourists going through, and all those things have to be happening when you're trying to clean it up. So, just another one of those great experiences that you get.
That's great. Got any more short?
No, that's good for me.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, Jerry, thank you.
Okay.